The Captain's Table by Richard Gordon. Chapter 1. Captain William Ebbs, M.B.E., master of the Polestar Line freighter Martin Luther, looked gloomily through the rain into the lower windows of his company's office in Leadenhall Street. They were bright with shiny models of liners, sliced miniature cabins, coloured photographs of bronzing girls leaping for deck quoits, and sunny posters beckoning bronchitic Englishmen, "Come to Australia!" A cheerful picture of shipboard life, which always upset him. So did the office itself, where every captain was summoned in the fresh insignificance of his shore-going clothes, to be bullied by pale clerks or girlish secretaries, and asked fogging questions about storm damage, sick seamen, and condemned stores reported and forgotten long ago in the voyage. These official visits had for many years seemed to Ebbs the severest penalties of command, but his present arrival was more heavily overshadowed by the certainty that he had come ashore to be sacked. Ebbs was a tall, bony, mild-eyed man with fussy hands and awkward feet, a distortion of the conventional image of a ship's captain, who now bore his authority with the weary air of an underpaid schoolmaster on the last day of term. As he entered the building, he respectfully removed his weeping trilby, misshapen through long stowage and sea air, and nibbled by 100 insects unknown in English wardrobes, and revealed under his mackintosh a brown tweed suit that had apparently been recently used for storing potatoes. "But Sir Angus was expecting you all afternoon, Captain," said the girl inside, as he announced himself. "I'm afraid I was delayed at the dock. How is he?" he added, as though asking if the blade were sharp. "He seems rather out of sorts today, sir." Speculating briskly on the possibilities of shore employment, Ebbs followed her to the room where the chairman of the line sat among the teak and traditions of his former ships. The Polestar Company was founded in the 1850s by a red-bearded Orkney sea captain called Andrew McQuirrie, who had roared his way around the China coast for 40 years, and by not troubling over much about working men and ships to death sailed into a fortune. He was a pious sailor who screwed his personal indulgence down to a pipeful of tobacco at sunset, and carried a Bible under his arm like a telescope. "The harvest truly is plenteous, but the labourers are few," he would shout at an idle deckhand, kicking him headlong into the scuppers. "Abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul." He could roar at a drunken boatswain, knocking him over the poop rail. Drinking and gambling were forbidden in his ship, and every Sunday all hands were ordered aft for church. He had a fine voice for reading prayers, and it was said that no one could take a better burial at sea. The present head of the line was an attenuated form of old Andrew, whose portrait stared down with a salty eye from the wall. The fiery hair was reduced to a pair of fuzzy edges on a pink scalp. The eyes that once split horizons were diluted with spectacles, and the voice that roared bloody threats into the forecastle modulated politely for the telephone. But Angus McQuirrie was as tough a shipowner as his great-grandfather. As he could no longer use a belaying pin or his boots, he subjected his subordinates with daily lashes of confidential memoranda, which vetoed promotion and kept men he disliked in the company's outdated tramps until they were overtaken by retirement or heat stroke. For some seconds, McQuirrie looked at Ebbs in the way his ancestor used to inspect errant members of the crew while deciding whether to flog them at the mainmast or blacken their faces with boiling pitch. "Sit down, Captain," he said quietly. Ebbs obediently took the edge of a chair. "You report from Aden." McQuarrie went on, contains many interesting passages. I am particularly struck by your remark. He found his place on the flimsy. The Martin Luther is no longer fit for the conveyance of freight, animals, or sailors, and I recommend that she be scrapped, scuttled, or, when next in Australia, presented to the government for the detonation of atomic bombs. He looked up. Would you care to expand that, Captain? Just take your time. I have the whole afternoon to listen to anyone who knows more about the shipping business than myself. Ebbs felt the rain on his collar begin to soak down his neck and said nothing. For 5 years he had held impatient command of the Martin Luther, a long, low hag of a ship, creaking herself to a standstill across the oceans of the world. He had dutifully suffered her uncertain refrigeration that left the food suddenly rotten and rancid a week out of port. The electric light that dimmed and faltered nightly, the condensation that streamed down the cabin bulkheads, and the cockroaches which paraded up them, the bewildering steering engine that set the ship cutting perilous circles in Sydney Harbour, and the crew of malcontents, refused by a dozen masters of better vessels, who came every morning truculently to the bridge and generally ended their shore leave in handcuffs. But the complaints that came hotly from his pen, kennelled in his cabin in the detachment of another hemisphere, froze and perished in the London air. He knew that the Pole Star Line expected its captains to fret in honourable silence. I was perhaps a little overwrought, he murmured hopefully. The heat, Sir Angus. We do not expect our masters who are in charge of lives and ships in tropical waters to be affected by the heat like girl guides on a picnic. Ebbs rose. He could at least take his dismissal like a master mariner of the British Merchant Marine. Sir Angus, he said with dignity, I have given 25 years of my life to this company, since I was a cadet of 16, and in a far better ship than the Martin Luther, I may say. I have always done my duty strictly in the company's interests, as my father and my grandfather did before me. I had hoped that in time virtue would not have to be its own reward, but I see that I was mistaken. As you no longer require my services, I will say good day to you, sir. He replaced his hat with modest defiance. I'm now going out to find myself a job. What or where, I have not the slightest idea, but at least it will be a change from the Pole Star Company, who, I might tell you, Sir Angus, he continued, feeling a wee bit alarmed at himself, are the biggest bunch of robbers afloat since Captain Kidd. Good afternoon. Captain Ebbs, McQuarrie said patiently. You sometimes appear to be a bloody fool. Ebbs paused. It's not a question of dismissing you. I asked you here to promote you. He pointed with his pencil to a rack on the wall, like a train indicator, which reproduced the daily position of the Pole Star fleet. In one column were the fast white liners, which inherited their titles like aristocrats, enjoyed launchings like fashionable weddings, and had their movements recorded below the stock market in the Times. In the other, the 50 hard-working unknown cargo boats that crept from British ports with ensigns humbled to their big sisters to lose themselves for months at a time among the sweaty harbours of the Java Sea, the Persian Gulf, or the Queensland coast. You knew Captain Buckle was taken ill? Ebbs stared at him. Collapsed on the bus yesterday. A great pity, of course. Nevertheless, his ship has to sail for Sydney on Monday, and we haven't a relief. We are therefore appointing you to the Charlemagne, Captain. But she's a passenger ship. So I was aware when my wife launched her. Ebbs struggled for coherence, swallowed, and stopped. Instead, he blew his nose. He often did so to make a point, seize time to think, or relieve emotion. "When can you go aboard?" Sir Angus asked. "Tonight, any time, this minute if necessary. Tomorrow morning will be soon enough." McQuarrie got up and paced thoughtfully across floorboards once trodden by a generation of angry shipmasters. "Captain Ebbs, what makes you think we people in the office know nothing at all that goes on at sea? Of course, the Luther's a bad ship. That's precisely why we kept you there. I'm not in the habit of handing out bouquets, but you made a good job of her, in your own way. At least you kept the vessel going, and the crew alive, which is something of an achievement in the Luther. You must have more confidence in yourself, man. You're not a fourth mate any more. And try not to be so infernally fussy. It'll only upset your new officers." "Fussy? Me? Fussy, sir? I must make it quite clear that this new appointment is probationary. I gather Buckle's unlikely to return to sea. If you're a success, we may therefore consider a permanency, despite your views on the company that pays you." I only meant it as a joke." Ebbs tried to smile. "No doubt, most amusing. With ordinary luck, and if you find your feet early enough, there's no reason why you shouldn't make a perfectly good captain in the Charlemagne. But if you're not a success, back to the Luther. You understand?" Ebbs nodded. "Very well. Then there seems nothing more for me to do except congratulate you on behalf of the directors, and of course wish you a most pleasant voyage."